Anand, leader of McKinsey Digital in Asia at McKinsey & Company. You can find Anand's full biography on the screen under this media player. If you're interested in finding out more about this subject that we'll be discussing today, you can download the full report by McKinsey about technological leapfrogging in Asia, which is available on this page. So I think we'll just dive right into the questions. And what I wanted to kick off with was the significant technological transformation that we've witnessed in Asia over the past decade is arguably attributed to four key elements that you've outlined in the report. So that's consumer demand, a concentration of large manufacturing companies, a large labour pool, and active policy support from governments. So I was just wondering how you think these enablers can mitigate the barriers to digital acceleration in the region.
Thank you again, Sue. It's such a pleasure to speak with you today and share some of the thoughts. Fundamentally on this topic of how do we think digital actually changes and drives value, and to your point around mitigating some of those challenges that may exist with digital in the region, the first part that we didn't talk about and thought about in the report is consumer demand. At the end of the day, consumer demand is changing the pace of digitization that's happening. If we look at, in 2019, right, 42% of the world's middle income earners were right here in Asia and more than any other region. And as that increases, what's interesting, they are the consumers that are driving the digital utilization out there. They're actually saying they have access to the internet. They have more access to, given GDP growth as well in the region, they have a way in which they can increase the use of technology to do things such as commerce, to do things such as interaction and the like. And so at the end of the day, when 29% of the real consumption spending right in 2019 was happening right here in Asia, and when we think through that growth and the acceleration of consumer demand and digitization, we actually see that is going to play a fundamental shift. Look, we know we have more than 400 million internet users right here as well, right? So how can they be that change agent for digital? So we see that as a key trend. Another dimension, as you mentioned in the report, is we do talk about manufacturing as a sector that actually has quite a distinct advantage right here in Asia. So when we think about the concentration of semiconductor companies right here in Asia, when we think about the spike in smartphone assembly right here in Asia, these are the manufacturing, leaders that happen to be in the region. That what they're creating is, what do they do with demand and supply? What do they do with their overall supply chains and infusing and embedding digital to drive the output in production, but also, frankly, to drive the efficiency in their supply chains and how they think about it. So I think technology is having that significant impact in the manufacturing companies to say there's a new business model and how we think through it. In terms of also what we see within policy and what's really happening here, governments are playing an integral role in saying they will fuel research and development. And when they're fueling and funding research and development in the region, digital is that recipient of those research and development funds. At the end of the day, when we look at the commitment that the region is actually making, Asia has captured more than 87% of the global growth in patent filings, which means innovation and that R&D function is happening right here in Asia. So when we think through, even just in 2016 to 2018, in those few years, China alone accounted for 45% of the world's patents, right? So innovation and driving that change funded by and supported by governments makes it a true driver of digitization in the region. So those are some of the trends that we saw in the report.
So I read another McKinsey report from 2020, which says that chief information officers report up to 20% of their technology budget, which is dedicated to new products, is actually diverted to resolving issues related to tech debt. I hadn't come across this term before, but I found it really interesting, and based on my own experience working within organizations, it immediately resonated with me. And I guess almost every business, to some degree, has tech debt, which can hinder the competitiveness of a firm. So I was just wondering if you could briefly explain what tech debt is and how you think companies can mitigate and manage the costs and complications of tech debt.
Sure. Tech debt is now becoming a new buzzword, and it's certainly been used a lot in business context everywhere. And it's not just a technology theme anymore, it's business leaders and CEOs understand the importance. And what tech debt fundamentally is the fact that most organizations have delayed their investments in technology to where they've essentially allowed, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. So let's keep our technology running over time, but let's defer our investments to growth in consumer interactions, or let's do it to product development, or let's defer investments to other priorities that are always top of mind in companies. So tech debt is essentially what's accumulated over the years of the lack of investment in the technology capabilities in an organization. We actually found that the CIOs were estimating that tech debt amounts to about 20 to 40% of the value of their entire technology estate before any depreciation. That's a pretty significant portion of your overarching technology cost and technology budget if truly it's unpaid debt in where investments haven't been made in technology. In fact, we also, when we spoke to the CIOs, we found that, despite their best efforts, 60% of these CIOs see the amount of tech debt in their organization actually continuing to rise, primarily because we have many priorities to focus on as leaders. So a few things to really solve that, right? One of the things is really making tech debt a problem that not just IT solves, but actually the business solves, right? What are the strategic levers that get unlocked if we can invest in our technology today, modernize our technology stack, drive to more modular capability? What would happen if we did that better today? Another dimension is really you have to be able to measure it. I think a lot of organizations never really thought about measuring and saying what is the impact. Now you're starting to see real measurement and metrics around there. So now they know they need to change. And also it actually behaves quite similarly to financial debt. At the end of the day, organizations should actually optimize their technology debt. They should look at where should I invest, how should I improve, and how should I save at the end of the day my future state of my technology. And so this strategic focus is really what we're seeing the trend and pattern happening now. And tech debt is becoming a true CEO priority, not any longer just a CIO or an IT priority.
Yeah, that's really fascinating and makes so much sense. I was just very curious to talk about the creation of a lot of digital consumers as one of the benefits of technological leapfrogging. And I was wondering if you could give me some examples here that could be linked to social impact.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let's take a sector or an area like consumer payments, right? At the end of the day, Asia, by the way, accounted for 41% of the global consumer demand in 2018, and it'll actually represent 56% of the global growth in that demand in the next 10 years. That's a significant portion of it, which means then the consumer payments capability has to be optimized and has to be made available. And frankly, what's happened is this concept of credit cards, it's gone. It's more about how can I have digital wallets, which allow me to spend from whichever account, whichever capability, and allow me to drive that commerce interaction that we also crave, and especially as we see the demand spike up, especially here in Asia. So e-commerce transactions, right, in Asia are certainly on the rise, and by the end of 2019, e-commerce spending had already accounted for about 3.5% of Asia's GDP. We're expecting that to more than double or triple in the next few years, especially accelerated also by the global pandemic. So when we think about consumer payments as a sector, we are finding that the social impact of the ease of consumer payments, how I can transact with my, whether a super app type of concept that I may have, connecting to multiple wallets and capabilities. I don't need to be a banked customer. I don't need to have a bank account or a credit card in order to have commerce. That's having a very positive social impact as we enable that. Another sector we've seen this in is fundamentally is healthcare. Healthcare has been where we have actually found digitization has accelerated quite rapidly. let's take a concept like telemedicine. Telemedicine has been around actually for a few decades. However, when we look at what's happening more recently with telemedicine, the spike is almost 5x what we've seen in the use of telemedicine. Again, accelerated by the pandemic, but it may be a trend. It may be here to stay. As an example, there were 8 billion telemedicine consultations across China every year. That's the volume of telemedicine transactions we're having. So when we think about something like Ping An's Good Doctor platform, right, that has increased more than 8 times the usage, people don't want to go to hospitals. And this is also bringing medicine and patient care closer to the home of the individuals or closer to the individuals themselves. Big social impact right here, because we find that it's sometimes, in many cases, difficult to get access to good healthcare, get access to the right medicines. We are finding that this is going to be a revolution, a shift where digitization has actually done this. Even when you look at something like in India, telemedicine companies that, experience a surge in the share of customers that are willing to pay for doctor consultations, it went from 8% to 70% between March and May of last year. So how do we see that spike, and how do we show that doctors are also getting on the platform? It jumped more than 10,000, doctors showing up and really caring about how they can provide it. So I do feel that there's a real change in the healthcare sector as well. And finally, we may actually look at beyond that, the government sector is actually quite impacted by this too. Let's look at what's happened with education, right? We are investing in education through digital. We are providing more content and more capabilities to students anywhere around the world. I think that's another sector from the social impact. Have we just made education more accessible to the world than ever before through the power of digitization? So these are some of the sectors that we see the difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty comprehensive. You've spoken about digital wallets, telemedicine, and education shifting online. Are there any opportunities that you think would be really great if companies or governments harnessed that haven't yet done so?
Yeah, look, we should be thinking about, again, for the social good, but also how we might think through different potentials. So as an example, let's look at energy, right? And even when we link it to something like climate risk, Asia is arguably more exposed to climate risk than any other region in the world, right? So you almost have the additional task now as we have rising energy needs. What do we need to do with sustainability in the region here in Asia? Right, so renewable energy is expected to account for almost 40% of the average annual global energy investments through 2025. And Asia is actually leading the charge in that, right? So the region actually has the largest share of installed renewable capacity anywhere in the world, 45%, right? When you compare it to Europe that has about 25% and North America that has about 16%. So we actually expect this is an area where if you look beyond the sectors that we just talked about, Asia is actually expected to really pull much further ahead with things like climate change, with things like renewable energy sources. And this is making companies take notice. And they're saying, well, what should we be doing in any geography? For instance, if you look at South Korea and you look at Japan, right, they use hydrogen for fuel. Hyundai of South Korea has actually developed one of the world's first commercial fuel cell EV, right? And they did that almost a decade ago. Japan's Toyota and Honda are actually producing fuel cell EVs also at electric vehicles at scale. So how are we thinking about this aspect of renewable energy sources and other areas that really do power some of that growth, while thinking through what the climate risk and sustainability models really need to be in Asia? Because again, Asia is by far most exposed to much of that. So those are some of the other dimensions I think organizations should be thinking through, and how digital is actually playing a role in influencing that thing.
I just wanted to shift towards tech talent in the region now. So you've your report identifies expanding business technology services in digitalization as one of the aspects of technological leapfrogging. And I was wondering, do you think there is enough tech talent in the region to enable this? And if not, what are the gaps and how can they be plugged?
I think this is a terrific topic around tech talent, because at the end of the day, talent is what will accelerate things like innovation, will accelerate outcomes, new product development, and the like. And I think it's a great question you're asking about, do we have access to the best tech talent here? So maybe some thoughts around that. Look, I personally believe that Asia has a distinct set of advantages when it comes to the pool of technology talent. Asian countries together actually produce 76% of the world's STEM graduates in 2016 to 2018. 76% of the graduates are right here from Asia. India happens to actually produce the largest number of computer science graduates in the world, about almost 220,000 graduates every single year. That type of talent, the question is, do we have the right problems that we can attach them to solve right here in the region? And I believe we do. When we look at the post-pandemic future, right, Asian players can actually potentially capture value from the rising demand in business technology services. And now we've got agile and distributed working models. I can work from anywhere, you can work from anywhere, we can access the talent from anywhere. So how do we think through the fact that the region really has a potential to grow its global presence if it can successfully develop and deploy this pool of talent that we clearly have access to in the region? But also, can we be more agile in the region so that we're actually also capturing the global demand while capturing the demand for those skill sets and those services right here in Asia? If we also take another dimension, such as the adoption of digital and AI technologies, again, this will require highly skilled workers and resources and talent. In fact, according to the World Economic Forum, around 54% of all employees globally will actually need to be reskilled or upskilled by 2022, given this demand. So we here in Asia have the chance to fundamentally continue to scale up what we have with our talent. We are clearly producing the most number of technology talent than anywhere else in the world. Now deploying them to the most important problem statements that's inspiring to them, solving that here in Asia and in the region, I think we might have a really good shot at tapping into the best talent there is.
There's so much more ground to cover, but I think we're out of time. So thank you so much for speaking with me today. It's been a really wide-ranging discussion about all the different technologies that we're seeing emerging, as well as some that may emerge very soon in the future, and the sort of opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. I'd also like to thank McKinsey & Company for supporting this event. And please stay with us, because next we have a live debate. Is digital technology essential to solve the world's most pressing social problems? With my colleague from The Economist, Simon Cox, who is the Emerging Markets Editor. Thank you once again, and goodbye.